guys, how's it going? So in this video I'm actually going to be removing my passenger temperature actuator. Now the reason I'm doing this is because mine is starting to squeak. If you follow my channel, I just recently did my zone actuator, and now I'm going to turn my attention to the passenger temperature actuator. This process is pretty much the same for if you have the digital climate controls or the manual climate controls, because each of them has one temperature actuator in the same spot. The only difference being that the digital climate controls have a driver actuator, temperature actuator. So you have two temperature actuators for the digital climate controls. The manual has one. So the process is fairly simple. It shouldn't take no more than 10 minutes to get it out. And this video would be useful for if you need to remove it, to replace it, or perform maintenance on it. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get your passenger seat all the way back as far as it'll go. So push it all the way back, and that will allow you room to get to the kick panel, or sometimes known as the underside dash panel plate here. There is a plastic plate under here with 3 retaining pins. There's the first one, the second one, and the third one, and these push pins need to come out so that this panel will fall. Okay, so getting these pins out is actually pretty easy. You could use a pair of pliers and pull on it, but essentially you've got a center pin here that puts pressure on an outer pin that holds this in place. So what you want to do is you want to get a small flat blade screwdriver. I don't really feel like messing these up, so I'm going to use a screwdriver method. And there's a little notch here on both sides, and you just basically lift on it until it's gone. I mean, it's literally that easy. And you do the same thing for all of them. There's 3 in total. So here's a closer look at the actual pin, and you can see how it's actually designed. You got this center pin right here, and that puts pressure on the outside of the pin to keep it from being pulled out. It just expands it. So when you lift up on the center pin, it just releases that tension and allows this bottom portion here to be squeezed and then pulled out. It's really not that complicated. Alright, so when you release the 3 push pins, you'll notice the entire panel comes down, and you can actually just twist this, and that will allow you to remove the dome light or interior lamp, and you just want to put that aside. Now my car will automatically shut these off after, I think it's 20 minutes or 30 minutes, but since I have my door open, that's going to stay on. Optionally, you could just pull the bulb, but I'm not really worried about it. It's just kind of just sitting there. So now that is the lower panel is off, we can move that to the side. We're going to get the fuse panel off, or fuse cover, and that's pretty easy to get off. There, simple as that. So now that's off, and what that's going to allow us to get access to is this plate right here, and this protective plate comes off actually fairly easy. Basically, you just take the whole thing and you just kind of pull down on it, and that's it. So this is a trim piece, comes off really easy. We'll set that aside. The next thing that we need to do is we need to get this door out of the way. So basically just open your compartment door, and this right here is the stop that prevents the door from basically just falling when you open it. And what you do is you've got 2, I'll try to get a side shot here, you've got 2 separators here, and it looks like, let's see if I can get focused in. One of them is independent of the other, and basically what you do is you lift your door up slightly, you push in with your thumb away from you, and then that will allow the door to fall. You can see how it's held in there. This is the stop for it. This basically prevents it from falling down, and then you've got your locking right here, which controls how fast the actual glove compartment, as it's sometimes called, falls. You got this little gear here. The next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pull this trim piece here back slightly. You don't need to bring it all the way out. You just need to be able to get access to remove this side trim panel here. So the easiest way, I've done videos of this before, but the easiest way is to just grab it from the corner down here, like this and just pull out. You can see how easy that comes out. Now be aware, this piece right here is probably going to pop out on you, but I'm not bringing it out all the way. So just enough to be able to basically unlatch it from the inside here. And then what you do, you take this bottom portion here and you just pull out on it. Let's see if I can do this as carefully as possible. There we go. All right. So there's 4 actually in total, but once you've got this panel off, just be careful getting it off. Mine just kind of popped off. All right, so the screws that we're trying to get to are these 4 Phillips head screws. So we're going to get to these 4 Phillips screws here, and we should start lowering this unit. Okay, so I'm down to 1 screw here, right there. And I want to make sure that I make it clear, you're going to want to hold this while you're getting the last screw out. The reason is because it's going to put a lot of strain on that 1 screw, and it might actually crack this plastic, because as you're unscrewing the last one, all of the weight from the compartment is going to start wanting to come down. So just make sure that you're holding it with one hand and unscrewing it with the other. You know, I've just got my arm basically right here at this point, so that it all doesn't just fall at once, and it doesn't put too much strain on that 1 screw and possibly crack this. Okay, so with the compartment now completely disconnected by screws, what I've done is I've closed the door, and this is free hanging, so you don't want to just let this go. So now that the door is actually closed, I can actually maneuver this back and forth. You basically just take it and you slide it back and forth until the whole thing comes out, and you might even be able to see back there the retaining. There's a set of wires back here, and the only thing that's holding it on right there are those retaining clips. Okay, so with the glove box out, you can see up under here you've got 2 actuators on this side. This is the zone actuator right here, this first one. I have a video on removing that and doing maintenance on that. I'll leave a link in the description. And then just behind it is the temperature actuator. This would be the Passenger Temperature Actuator. So this controls the temperature of the air coming out of the 4 vents that are directly in front of the passenger. And over time, with loss of lubrication, grease, whatever's in there, the motor will start to have a hard time turning. And if you leave it for too long, then you might actually have some gears or motor burnout. So we're going to go ahead and remove this and get it inside and perform some maintenance on it. Okay, so you'll see that there are 2 screws right there. There's 1 screw there and there's 1 up there. They're actually 5.5 millimeter screws. Kind of unusual, but so there's 2 of them. So get your 5.5 millimeter socket and ratchet and go ahead and remove those 2 screws. Okay, so with the 2 screws removed, that's what they look like. Now we can actually remove this. Basically just pull it out or away gently, and then what you have here is you have the actuator. So before we can get it inside, see if I can get focused here, before we can get it inside, we have to unplug the harness. Right there is a little tab at the top. See that? Just take a flat blade screwdriver or your finger, just lift up on the tab portion down there, and the harness should release. Okay, so let's do a closer look at what we got in here. Basically, there's a shaft right there that just controls the temperature of the air coming in, and that blows it out through the passenger vents. It's really simple. There's actually not much to it at all. So here is the actual actuator. Pretty simple. You can see the little indentation for where the shaft goes. So let's go ahead and get this inside, and we'll see if we can get this thing fixed up. Hey, alright, so I've got the actuator inside now, and it's actually pretty simple. I mean, there's really not much to it. Fortunately, it's easy to get open. There are tabs right here, retaining tabs. Looks like there's 4, yeah, 4 in total. So basically, you just take your flat blade screwdriver and you wedge it in between there, and then you just kind of lift up in that spot, and it should stay open like that. Just do that all the way around until you've got it open. Alright, so I actually discovered 2 additional clips right there on both sides of where the harness plugs in. There's also 2 additional. I was messing around trying to get this apart and couldn't figure out why. Well, I didn't notice that there's 2 here. So there's 2 additional there that also need to be released. Alright, so I went ahead and released all the tabs. This should come right up. Alright, so that is up now, and that's what the inside looks like, nothing special. So what we have here is just like the other actuators. We have a DC motor here, a 12-volt DC motor, and then we have a series of plastic gears that actually turn the door, the actual mechanism. So it's, but on the other side here is the actual connector for the shaft, and then you've got a series of gears here. I'm not really wanting to get all these apart. Let's see here. Take this gear off right here. So what you can see, I don't know how well you can see that, but basically the grease, just like the other actuator, you can see where it's bound up. It's collected right at this point right there is where it's actually collected. And that's pretty annoying because all the grease is in this area and these gears are getting dry. So most likely what is happening is because these aren't greased up very well, especially this one right here seems to be the driest, especially on the bottom here. There's no grease on there at all. So what's happening is they're basically not getting the grease that they need to get to function properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take all the grease that's collected right here at this end point, and I'm going to spread it amongst all of the gears. And that should fix the problem. So with the light on, you might be able to see this even better. Do you see where the grease has pretty much left the gear itself? Right here at this point, you can see that the gear itself isn't even greased up at all. All the grease got pushed to the top of the gear. So essentially it's not even functioning grease-wise. There's still some grease here on this wheel right there, or this gear, so that should be okay, but I'm going to go ahead and take all the rest of it and spread it around. Okay, so I went ahead and put all of the grease, I spread it all around. You can see here there's no collection on the motor shaft anymore. I spread it all over the place, fairly easy to do. Just remember where the gears are at. It's pretty straightforward. This big gear here on the left, you can't mix that up because that's where the shaft is at. Just make sure that you look and see exactly how I've got this set up so you don't forget where the gears go. It's pretty straightforward. There's only 3 gears, and only 2 of them would cause any confusion anyway. So now that that is done, we can go ahead and put the cover back on. And do this gently. There's openings on the inside here for where the shafts actually go for the gears. So make sure you line those up the best that you can before you try to squeeze this in together. Just rotate it around until it feels like it's going to lock into place. And then you should be able to set it down in there. Alright. So alright, all set. So that's back together now. I'm going to actually turn this just for a second. Okay, good. So, alright, the gears are locked into place, and now we can get it back into the car and test it to make sure that it works okay. Okay, so I actually plugged mine back in, and this is where I'm going to set up a little disclaimer here. You're working with electricity, you're working with motors and all that other jazz. So I won't be responsible for if you injure yourself, burn yourself, break something, whatever. But the whole point is I'm going to test this to make sure that it's still working. Okay, so let's get the keys and the ignition. it's already moving around in there a little bit. You can probably see that. So if anybody was curious, I'm going to turn my light on so that you can see this better. Alright, so you can probably see that the temperature actuator is actually moving around in there. Now I don't have the heater on at all. I don't have anything. It's literally off, but it's still moving around in there. Now right now, obviously, because there's nothing connected to it, it's actually searching. It's basically feeling for when the motor actually stops, and it senses that. So obviously with nothing connected to it, it's not going to stop. It's just going to keep turning. But this is good anyway, because right now it's spreading the grease around. So, alright, well, it seems to work just fine. I'm going to go ahead and get it hooked back up, and it should be back in business. Okay, so this part is a little bit tricky because you have to make sure that you line this up properly. And unfortunately, because this has turned, it's not going to line up with that shaft right there. So there's two things that you have to do. And basically, first of all, you want to make sure that this hole right here that's on the left, to the left of the harness, so if you're looking at it like this hole right here has to line up with this tab right there. Let's see if I can get focused. That tab right there, it has to line up. So when it's going in, it'll look like this, like it's almost sideways coming to you, okay? I'll have to do this with two hands, but basically what you do is with the with the HVAC controls off, what's going to happen is when you put the ignition to on, this is going to start spinning. And while it's doing that, you need to line it up, and eventually it'll lock into place. Because unfortunately, right now, if you tried to line it up, it's not going to be in the proper spot to do so. So you basically hold it up against the shaft, make sure it's lined up with this tab here, and you wait for it to spin around to where it's going to grab this. Okay, so this might be a little bit difficult to get on camera, but basically I've got the one slot lined up, and what you do is you line it up the best that you can. You try to approximate exactly where, if you can see what I'm doing here. Basically I've got it lined up, and what I'm going to do is put the key in the ignition, the motor's going to start spinning, and then I'm just going to be pushing in while it's spinning until it locks, and then it should slide right in. See how well, I don't know how good of a view that is. We'll see how well this works. So key to the on. I'm applying pressure inward. I'm actually changing the controls a little bit here, and there it goes. All right, so just like that. So hopefully I got that on camera, and now I've got the controls to off. So hopefully I was able to get that on camera. That's basically how you do it. Make sure that the passenger temperature is on, and you just set the temperature, and then while the motor is spinning, it should lock into place. Hopefully I got that on camera. So if you have to, you can modify the temperature up and down until it spins to where it needs to. So now it's locked back into place. I can go ahead and insert the screw. All right, screws are back into place. So essentially we've reinstalled this, and now we can begin the calibration process of recalibrating the HVAC. All right, so the best way to recalibrate your HVAC controls is to pull this fuse right here. This is a 10 amp fuse. It's marked HVAC. And when you pull that fuse, pull it for about maybe 10 seconds or so, then put it back in. It's actually going to reset your HVAC controls so that they can be calibrated. And in order to make sure that you got the proper temperature flow and so on, you will need to calibrate this because the motor isn't lined up to where it was before you were messing with it. So we're going to go ahead and pull this 10 amp HVAC fuse. Okay, so the HVAC fuse is actually this one right there. It's right above the 15 amp fuse. Just pull that fuse, wait about 10 seconds, put it back in, and we should be able to recalibrate our climate controls. Okay, the 10 amp fuse is back in. I'm going to go ahead and start my car. And basically what you do, make sure that your controls are set to off. And you'll hear motors turning. You'll hear all sorts of stuff going on down there. Basically, it's calibrating. Even when the system's off, it's still calibrating. But we're going to go ahead and let it sit here for about 30 seconds or so before we mess with the controls. Alright, so I'm not hearing any more movement of the motors. So what you want to make sure is that you set your zone to auto. And then you set your fan speed to auto. And just like that, it's going to start calibrating. Now you know that it's in calibration unless you happen to have this set at 73, but when this is set to 73, it means that it's been reset. So right now what it's doing is it's going through all of the sensors and getting information and recalibrating the various actuators. So what you do is you basically just sit here for about a minute, minute and a half and wait for the process to complete. Okay, so it's been almost 2 minutes actually is how long I waited, and so now we can in fact mess with the controls. And what I'm actually going to be doing is I'm going to be letting my car warm up because this is a cold start. So I'm going to let my car warm up, and that way what I can do is I can set the driver temperature either all the way down or all the way up, and then I can set the passenger temperature the opposite, and then I can feel the difference between the two and make sure that the actuator is in fact working. Now, because we are working with the passenger actuator, you can mess with the controls up and down and then just feel the vents and feel if the temperature changes. If you do have the manual climate controls, you don't have to worry about passenger driver, but if you change the temperature setting, then it should affect all of the vents. So just keep that in mind. The only difference between the two is I can control the passenger temperature, and with the manual controls, it's basically the entire temperature for the entire car. Okay, so everything seems to be working just fine. So we have successfully performed maintenance on our passenger temperature actuator. And if you have the manual climate controls, it's also known as just the temperature actuator. So now that that's finished and we've confirmed everything's working just fine, we can go ahead and put everything back together. And I'm going to go ahead and shut the car off, get the glove box reinstalled. Okay, so to get this glove box back in, I have already reconnected these clips here, but to get the glove box back in, you just basically do everything in the reverse order. And I'm going to need 2 hands to do this because I'm going to need to hold the glove box at the same time that I'm actually screwing the 4 screws back in. But make sure you open your glove box again, and this is much easier to get to now, but you just make sure the glove box is completely open so that you have access on the other side to the screws to remount the glove box. So you will need 2 hands for this, so I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Real quick, I wanted to show you after the glove box is open, to get it back in, you just do the exact same thing as getting it out. You just wiggle it back and forth until it's in place, and you kind of have to move it around a little bit. But once you get the this stopper here aligned on both sides, you'll see the screw holes will be lined up. You'll see it. You just got to fiddle with it until you get it lined up, and then you get your screws back in. Alright, so I'm lined back up. I'm using my hand to hold it right now, otherwise it would just fall back out. But the holes are lined up. You might be able to see that in there. The holes are lined up. Might need a little bit of a shift to get it perfect, but just using one hand to hold it and another hand to screw the screws in. Thread them by hand at first, and then go with your screwdriver the rest of the way. Make sure all 4 of them are in before you release your hand, so that you don't put any more stress on one than the other. Alright, so all 4 screws are back in place. With the glove box open, you just basically line the holes up. I'm going to have to do this with 2 hands. But just basically line it up and then just tap it in with a little bit of force, and it should lock right back into where it was before. Right, we're locked back in, so now we just take this, push it back together. Literally as easy as that. So that's back together. Now we can go ahead and get the side piece trim here back in. Alright, just as easy as it came out, make sure this hole is facing you or the right side, and you should be able to just snap it right back in place. Simple as that. Now you can actually close the glove compartment. Alright, works just fine. Fuse panel, very easy, goes right back in where it came from. Once I've got it lined up, that is. Alright, fuse panel's back in. Alright, so the glove box is back in and it is fully functional. Opens just fine. Does the slow open deal. So yeah, everything's back together on the glove compartment or glove box or dash box, IP panel storage. There's a couple of different names for it, but we'll just call it glove box because that's what they used to call it back in the day. One last thing to do before we're done, we need to get the kick panel back up. First thing we got to do there is make sure we've got it facing the proper direction. You want the hole opening, the big opening, to be on the left side, and you want the opening for the actual lamp to be on the right side. I'm going to have to do this with two hands, but basically I'm going to attach this here, and then I'm going to lift up on it, line up the holes, and then just take the push pins right here and just literally just push them up back in. Make sure the plunger is all the way in, and it's as easy as that. All right, a job well done. We've finished up. Everything's back where it should be. All right, guys, hopefully this video helped you out. If you have any questions, definitely let me know, and I'd be more than happy to answer those. So take care, guys.